UK Cinema History, Episode 6, If, 1968, directed by Lindsay Anderson, with Sila Blume and Yassi Soufi.
Yes, we're talking about if. So I'm going to pull up, I mean, I'll try to condense my thoughts because I have several things and I think I have to watch it yet again. I watched it yesterday. I need to watch it again because there's quite a lot of stuff in there that I think um, I'm very curious. Very many aspects. I haven't read any analysis on this film, which I like doing about symphonies and operas, what some minds analyze about it, or scientific communities. The first thing I would say is the last time I saw it, I noticed something I didn't notice the first time around. They have this very interesting back and forth when they're doing fencing, when they decide to fence after the young boy, who, as I understand, is only 12 in that film. He looks older than that. The guy who is given to do this coming for one of the guys, he has a um, very feminine looking face and very pretty boy in a positive sense of the word. And he's only just after he's admiring the gymnast, they start doing this fencing, and during this fencing they have quite a few exchanges, up to the point where they say, "What stands if freedom falls? What stands? Um, what dies if England lives?" And there's another one. I took pictures because I couldn't get it otherwise. They make three statements, and then also they say, "Some love England and have only yet," and I cannot catch the. I'm very curious about that conversation. It seems a little bit like a crazy conversation amongst the three friends, but I think that has a lot to do with the concept, or the the main concept of the film, especially because they keep using if, and just the things they
Uh,
talk about. Yes.
I'm sorry. That reminded me of France, French Revolution motto, which is like liberté, égalité, fraternité, like freedom, equality, and brotherhood. Uh, they kind of use it in term of like uh, UK, uh, because like in the previous sequence, if you remember, they talk about it. They talk about
Correct. In the
yeah.
schoolroom. Yes.
So so I think uh, they're trying to mimic what happened in in the game that they're playing. Uh, they're trying to imagine a a French Revolution happening where they are in UK, or you know because I rather think about the movie as like uh like not specifically happening in UK, because the theme is so general and universal. That's why. So I think they kind of they're trying. And also their three friends, they kind of reminded me of Three Musketeers. That's why also I can relate it to French Revolution and French history. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, please.
No, no problem. I have many things in my head, and I I didn't get to make notes, but um, England awake, war even to the knife.
Tell us about the bizarre song of the film. I couldn't wait to hear what you're gonna say about it.
Last night I was thinking that is nothing extravagant, but I like very much the fact that, as far as I understand, they basically use one piece, although I think it's not only one. Um, I recall that it's used sometimes as a hymn, as a religious, and sometimes as a more national anthem. But I found interesting that they apparently they use just one or two pieces throughout the whole film. So in a way, you don't have background music, but almost all the way around. We are focusing on this hymn, and that is what carries the whole film again and again and again. And additionally to this music and to this theme, we are going to give you pictures to look at because it's basically the same tone, the choir, the religiosity, the the camaraderie, the the dedication of men together, even though there's a couple of women that are allowed to be there. But I found that interesting how everything, the backbone is the music, which of course is not about the music, it's about the topic, what they're talking about. The purity, the, the sticking together, and this godliness and religious thoughts that they are trying to promote. There's also, I mean, I'm going to jump back and forth. There's also something I did not understand. This young boy, I can remember his, I think his name is, he died very young. He was in his 50s when he died. The young, good looking boy. He was never, for obvious reasons, he was never part of that trio. So, how does he come up at the very end of the film when they're asked to work instead of being punished? He's working with them and he fights with them. Why does he suddenly is in? Why is he suddenly in their camp?
Oh,
He
oh,
doesn't
haven't you
belong there.
seen? But there is that he grow a relationship between him and the third guy
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
on the group
yeah.
with
Yes,
Wallace. Yeah, and it's not it is kind of love. It's not a it's not an abusive kind of relationship that the whips try to create, like try to force on him. He, if you remember, that's a very beautiful scene where they play gym when Wallace, the guy that he likes, is playing gymnastics in the gym.
yes.
That it goes black and white, and yeah, that's a very beautiful scene. That we kind of see, like he grows a feeling. There's a connection between them. I think that's why. And then later they're smoking together on teacher's room. The
I
room.
think that's before that. They smoked together
The, oh,
before that. I think.
oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, there. So there's a connection. There's love there. Yeah.
Now, um, Anderson was not openly, apparently, but he was a homosexual. So I was asking myself if that is his contribution to his situation personally.
No,
Is
no, Sila. Actually, that was just a part of English boarding school life.
oh, they, yeah,
The
yeah, of
whole,
course. I mean, you have
yeah.
no choice.
But no, Anderson had nothing to do with that part of the screenplay. That was based
Okay.
on an actual relationship that the screenwriter Sherwood had when he was the Bobby Phillips to someone else's Wallace. in that relationship. But that was based on Sherwood's autobiography.
Yeah, that was a very interesting moment, because you see how it is impossible, not only through that scene, but it is a very gentle scene, so it's even more clear how it is impossible in that and many other scenes. It is impossible for men to be in such a atmosphere and not consider the homosexuality possibility. It is absolutely impossible for most individuals not to consider that when they're so tightly, friendly, devotion. It's just, and that came out very clear in that, like, he was very innocent, but it's nevertheless a spark that was suddenly burning there, and he was in awe of this person, movements, gymnastics, and that immediately leads into that fencing, interesting part that I was talking about.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Right after that, he plays gymnastics. They rush into the gym and start fencing. You're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's quite. That, that's the juxtaposition of that very sensual moment,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
right after that, that's so beautiful. You're right.
There's a lot of detail to the movie that I think one could analyze or go into from different perspectives, that could be in our crazy minds, or it could be intentional in Lindsay's mind, Anderson's mind, or not at all. I mean, it leaves a lot of possibilities to go into, especially because we don't, at least I don't know exactly to which extent is that abiding by a novel, to which extent is addressing some visionary point of what we need to do so England moves ahead, because the rector, not the rector, what's his name, the master, he, when he's leading some of the men and giving them a speech, kind of friendly, kind of inspirational, he talks about how how we we need these people who are outside of the norm. We need that to. For he gives them a very interesting speech, and he's actually a very interesting piece, who is trying to, and he seems to understand why these men are doing what they're doing, and and I think that's why at the end is the girl who kills him, because I don't think they dared to kill him, because I think they had a connect. They understood. They felt understood, perhaps, even though they still did a revolution. But I found that interesting that she's the one who kills him. They don't kill him.
That's an interesting observation. I didn't think about it that way. That that's why, like, the girl kills him because he tries. In some way he tries.
Yes,
Literally the girl, because they never gave her a name.
correct, correct. She died of cancer very early.
I love her, like her casting. I was telling on the other room that we had that she, we look at these guys and they all are wearing these tuxedos with their very traditional classical look, and then suddenly we have her, and she is the typical look of the 60s and the rebel and everything that happens at the end, this revolution, this revolt, this, you know this all this turmoil that these people went through, and also the 60s in general, like, represents the history of, it's the picture. And Eric said that she looks like Godard girls, like French New Wave girls.
Yes.
And yeah, yeah, she does, she really does. her with like the mini skirt. And also this headmaster, he talks about the mini skirt. He said, yeah,
Yes,
the
correct.
mini skirts, we understand that, yeah. And then the mini skirts get him killed. That's interesting. Yeah, you said it. That's very good observation.
And the go-go boots. Don't forget the go-go
Oh,
boots.
of course, of course. And the tiger eyes.
Well, I want to follow up with a question about what Sila was saying in terms of the theme of camaraderie in this. So, did you feel a genuine friendship between the three people in the film? Or were you, like a lot of people, kind of left cold as to wondering, exactly what bound these people together other than they were going to the same school?
I think that's not spoken, that's not displayed, because if you think about it, they are never showed, those three are never shown doing anything that has to do with school. They don't study, they do, I think they are once in a classroom together, but other than that, so I think they're assuming that bond. And of course, if we have any doubts, by the time they get to the brotherhood, cutting themselves to feel even closer. But to your question, I don't think they display any reasoning or logic for them becoming so close. I think they simply are on based on of assumption. In the end,
I
they have
thought.
been there
Oh, go ahead.
together
I'm
for
sorry.
years. They've been together for years. If you,
I thought that was part of what Anderson was kind of going for with the film, which is that it had a very cold surface to it. And it reminded me a lot of the theater, the absurd works, like uh, Beckett's the obvious example. And a lot of the dialogue between them seemed like absurdist dialogue that you'd see in an I Has to Go play, or like every morning I wake up dreaming I have bad breath, was an example. It seemed like almost as if the dialogue and the things that a normal film uses to move the plot along and to allow us to get to know the characters is at a different purpose, which is, and I hate to come back to this theme because it was a theme that we for all things, but it seems to me like this is an existential film, that it's truly about each character in themselves, and by tapping into those absurdist themes, into that you kind of place them all like Albert in Camus' The Stranger. Each and every one of them seems almost isolated from each other, because you don't feel any camaraderie between them, and yet they all join together, at the end, if you don't consider the end to be a fantasy, which a lot of people do. But then again, that's one of the things I love about this movie, is that I can watch it once and say that the ending really happened, and another time and say that the ending, is a fantasy, and be completely correct both times. But yeah, but I think it's the coldness of the film that is keeping us from actually feeling any sort of a development of their relationship or our relationship to these characters, which is deliberate, I think.
I think that is the basis, exactly that's the basis for me to think that they are very tight together, because they don't have the necessity to question what the other one says, and they could talk at the same time about two or three different topics because they are tight together. When he says, my bad breath, they're talking about other things, and they're not even paying attention to him. But I think the reason they do that is because they don't need to show they're paying attention because they're so close.
About the absurd theater that you said, I have the best example for that. Better than Beckett, it's Eugene UNESCO, Rhinoceros. There is also in that play also there are like almost three characters. One of them is an alcoholic, and it's the theme of saving the humanity and camaraderie between people. And yeah, you're right. Their dialogue between those three, especially when they're in the room. I told you on the other room that we had when the three of them are sitting together, and one of them is like paying attention to his look. Uh,
Yes.
Wallace, yeah, he's like saying these philosophical like spitting philosophical ideas, and the other one is
But they're
looking
but
through
but
like
but they're
girls. Of
nonsense philosophy, aren't they? They're not something we're not as an
course.
audience, and
Yeah.
they're not. And it's great. It's great in an absurdist way. But the UNESCO is a great comparison. But I would compare it to Waiting for Godot as well. Which is kind of the great masterpiece of absurdist theater in terms of that what they're saying doesn't matter. What Lindsay Anderson is showing us is them saying it, and I do have a few examples, and then I'll let you get back to it, Sila. But this is something that on my most recent, because I did watch the film again, because I decided to watch the whole entire trilogy back to back, but. This sounds like something from, or like a Tom Stoppard play or something like that. The thing I hate about you, Roundtree, is the way you give Coca-Cola to your scum and your best teddy bear to Oxfam and expect us to lick your frigid fingers for the rest of your frigid life. War is the last possible creative act. These are all just from Mick. There's one thing you can do with a girl like this: walk naked into the sea together as the sun sets, make love once, and then die. There's no such thing as a wrong war. These are just notes that I took while I was taking. I just, jotted them down. Violence and revolution are the only pure acts. The whole world will end very soon. Black, brittle bodies peeling into ash. And then you mentioned, both of us stumbled on this one. What stands if freedom falls? Who dies if England lives? When the lights go out, Steffens is the wannabe prefect. Steffens, whatever you're doing now, don't. And then when he's talking about the nail going in
Yes,
being the
yes.
worst in the back of his neck being
Slow.
he says,
Slow.
I don't see what difference the speed of the nail makes. The speed of the nail, and then they start laughing. Then some of the other characters I mentioned last week, the headmaster. Education in England is a nubile Cinderella, scarcely clad and often interfered with. What the fuck does that mean? Does it have something to do with the mice? I don't know. But it's perfectly absurdist. The girl, I wrote down what she said word for word because it is just so perfectly something that you would hear, like a Beckett character say. Go on, look at me, look at my eyes. I'll kill you. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror and my eyes get bigger and bigger, and I'm like a tiger. I like tigers, and that's when that half fantasy, half reality scene of a fight turning to sex happens. And I've got 5 or 6 others, but I think I've made my point. But that most of the dialogue, from at least the vantage point of me as a viewer, isn't there the way traditional dialogue exists in a film, to develop characters, to give us a sense of who these people are. You get a sense of who they are by what they do, what they say is almost like nonsense. I'm done interrupting you, Sila.
Oh, I didn't know that was an interruption. Otherwise, I would have complained. No, I think I was. I mean, I'll just listen to what you have to say, and then I'll come back to other things when I think of them.
I was thinking, in these traditional environments, of course, they're made to create this kind of loving, brotherly uh, attachment, like brothers and loving brothers. But what happens here is that this, the repressed and they create this kind of competition and anarchic and they destroy what these schools are made for, to create brotherhood instead of this feeling of you know uh, kind of whip and mm, oppression and this harsh environment. There should be this way of understanding each other, creating bond with each other, but that also goes down in the wrong way. What happened? Isn't it? There should be. They're there, and all those military trainings are because what happened during the war was that all the men were at war. So if the enemy attacked the city, they wanted these boys to be prepared for what's to come. And they kind of left it in the curriculum to be but yeah, the military training. But yeah, they're supposed to be brothers in arms, brotherhood, everything. But mm, that the wrong system turns that also, sorry, into shit.
Now, to me, the question comes: what is being sold to us as a system, and what is leading the ones in charge in the film? Which system? Godliness, England, um, the house. What is
I have an
actually the
answer for that.
leading thing?
I have an answer for that, Scylla. Because I did research. There's a gentleman wrote a book uh, that traces the history of the what we call boarding school in England. His name was David Turner. It's called The Old Boy. And these are traditions that go back to the 14th century. So the tradition of having the younger students coming for the for the older boys. Now they called that fagging back then, whereas the film, obviously, the phrase had been changed because fagging had taken on a different meaning. But that goes back to the 1400s. Almost all of these traditions go back that far. So, but the question I have is, what are they doing? What are they revolting for at the end when the revolution happens? What is their final aim? Once the headmaster's been shot in the head, what now? And I think that, but yeah, that doesn't mean it's not a good idea for perhaps a debate. You know, what makes we achieve with, with those guns by shooting those
Am I
people?
the only one having problems listening to
No,
Eric?
no. Me,
Okay.
Eric, we can't hear you. You're in the matrix. we couldn't hear what you
As
said.
soon as you said, I have the answer for your question, I couldn't understand more than 20% of what you said.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
But,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
but my question was another one. I expressed it maybe a little bit confusing, but I'm not talking about these traditions of scumming or any of that stuff. When when I'm the headmaster and I am convinced that I am doing the right thing and I am guiding these children to be proper men, what is the number one institution which also came up with Beckett, that a crown, an England without a crown is still England, something like that. Are they going by the nationalistic, by the people of England, or are they going by what God wants? When they are punishing the children, when they are guiding, and when they're showing in which direction they should go, is that a religious or a nationalistic system what they're abiding with? By I don't think it's a mixture. I think one has to be absolutely in charge, and that's why Beckett, I think, um,
Oh, the punishment? It's all the power play. I think it's all the system that goes by
yeah,
the
but in
power
the
play.
belief, yeah, but the belief itself, what I carry within me, I
That I have.
some
Now I have the answer
some
to that.
people see the nationality as number one, others see God as number one. Of course, most people see God as number one if they believe in God. But I don't think that everybody does, and I don't think that, like in Beckett, they make very clear between the king and Beckett, they come to a dialogue where they say the about the queen, about the crown, and God, and England. Which one needs which? So only one could be really in charge, and that's my question. Which is really the guiding force behind this school? God or England?
Oh, I think England by a long shot. Anytime you hear religion brought up, it's in terms of either war or pride in the college house or in country. God is probably a distant third,
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
but it is true of the English public school system. If you look at a school like Eton, that's produced, I think, their last six prime ministers, for example, the pride that graduates of Eton have. Eton means much more to these people than any religion.
Yeah.
I said it in the other room. I said, the question is how parents, what's this illogic, unreasoned, surrealist reason to put your kids in these type of environment? You kind of ask yourself, like, what kind of parents will do that? And the answer that I could find was that the promise. These parents have been to these kind of institutions, as well as this filmmaker and the script writer, so they've been exposed to these type of education and these type of system. Why? Because their parents have been there and they've been given this promise, and the nature of drive, this drive that tells you, that, and you would do anything for it. If they tell you that you're going to get the gold medal of Olympics, then if you take these medicine, if you put all these chemicals in your body, and if you go through these crazy trainings and do everything, you will do it because of that crazy promise. I think it's human nature that we're able to make all kind of obscene and crazy sacrifices for the promise, and
So,
that promise, empty
oh,
promise
go ahead,
sometimes.
Sila.
No, I was just going to add to that, and they believe in that, and that's why at the end, well, not at the end, when what's his name, Rogue Tree, what's his name,
Exactly.
the head whip. Anyway, the leading whip when he whips Travis, I think 8 times instead of four. Travis shakes his hand and says thank you. So that means to me, until the last minute, they abide by certain rules. That was the moment for him to say of anything but thank you. But after being whipped and after being left in the cold shower unfairly, according to him, unfairly for too long, he still says thank you and shakes his hand. So there's still, and it's the same thing with beating your child as punishment. I somehow came out of that cycle. My father didn't. I know people my age today who still believe strongly without beating a child, you cannot educate him. It's just not possible. So some people s- stick to the system, and others, of course, I guess Anderson, his parents went to these schools, and he's trying to call out the things that are wrong with that system, even though he went through that system, and that's why he's speaking about it. Just like Travis is trying to point things out, even though, like Eric said a few minutes ago, we don't know exactly what their goal is. But that discussion has been had many times. When we fight against the establishment, what are we going to replace it with? And that is actually mentioned in the film at some point. I think by one of the guys, one of the short fat guy, who's singing with the. That was funny when he's singing in bed and the woman is playing the clarinet or the flute or something like
Yeah, he does make a very good point, which I think makes the movie an allegory for England.
that. Yes.
But what does that allegory say?
Actually, I put an article in the chat that explains that allegory very well. But the question that you're asking, that for what? Why is this happening? That's the main question of every revolution. They say, like, if you punish all, if you send them all to the war, that who's left? That who's left behind for you to rule? That's the main question of every society that goes through through revolution, you know
Yeah, but
that
that is the same point I said last room about this film. We are always in the tendency to look for a goal, and that's what you're doing right now. Why? Why do we need to have a goal? I think that takes too much energy. We cannot know the conclusion. We just know through some experience and analysis that what's going on right now could not work. If we are looking definitely for a solution or an where to, then, for example, instead of using, because as you both well know, this 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 I don't want to call that a war, but the end of the film happened just by chance. They just happened to be working as punishment and happened to find what they found. And that's the only reason it came to that. So it was not a plan of theirs to shoot and do the scene they did. That just happened by chance. So if we want to have a solution or an endpoint, we could also say, well, if we didn't come to that war, they could have protested by restraining in other ways. They could have protested, I don't want to say by being peaceful, but there are other ways of saying, we don't agree with this, we're going to sit that down. We're going to sit it out, or whatever you want to call that. So I think if you really want to focus on what is the purpose of replacing a society, you don't really need to think of the goal, because all you need to do is stop what's going on. Life does not end when I stop. I might end when I stop, but life continues.
Yeah, that
So,
exact
so we don't need an answer.
that is exactly the question of revolution that I said. That it says that the this revolution is the state of perpetual purity of itself. That's what
Yes.
it says. That the significant rule of every revolution is that that's why it doesn't need anything. That doesn't need any goal. After it happens, after that revolution happens, then it's this purity of itself. You know, that's kind of that adds to that absurdity of the soul, the surrealism of it all. You made all these men, you create all this, theatrical, all, you go through all these things, all these punishments, all these rituals. But then at the end, you know, that's what Eric and I we talked about it on when we had the wall, you know. That's what's left at the end after all that.
On a lighter note, there's a situation that I need to mention. Is there's no depth to it. It's nothing intellectual. It's just a little mistake in the film, and that is when Travis and the other guy, just before they go and steal the motorcycle, they have come out of this building with handcuffs. For which reason, I don't know. But they come out jumping around and they go through this park where the two men are working on the soil and they are on handcuffs. They're tied together. The next scene, just 2 seconds later, from the other side, they have no handcuffs.
And he fakes the heart attack. And I have
Yes,
no idea. I'm thinking that's a scene that was cut out, that didn't make the
possible, yeah.
final film. But I don't know, or it's there on purpose for some reason. And unfortunately, we'll never know because Lindsay Anderson used to do all this stuff all the time.
Oh, I see.
He just would stick stuff in at random, and they but little puzzle pieces and things like that. And unfortunately, we'll never know because even if Anderson told us flat out what he wanted us to think it was, he'd probably be lying because he was just that kind of a person, which is kind of
I saw it
interesting.
very simple. I could say very cheesy symbolism. They're like they are handcuffed together. They're like brothers, and then when they actually enter the society, they lose this bond. Another kind of bond created, a bond through like stealing, a bond through like going having the girl, like another type of bond. But as long as like you know there's like that kind of handcuffed together
Or
kind
Anderson,
of.
as an advocate of free cinema, just liked how that scene looked and thought it would be fun and put it in there, which he thinks, which is part of the,
Nice.
that's part of the free cinema. And they got that from the French New Wave. That's part of the free cinema mantra. That we're here to why is the vicar in the drawer. is a a perfect
Yeah, that
example.
makes no sense whatsoever.
Of course it doesn't. It's just there, but that's part of the free cinema mantra. We can do these things. It also says that there's no such thing as genre. That I can't. If I make a film. And you attempt to say that it's a thriller, I'm going to immediately attempt to subvert this by making it the least thrilling thing you ever saw in your life, because genre doesn't exist. That's part of free cinema. And so I think whether it's a mistake or whether it's there on purpose, it's like the vicar in the drawer, we'll never know. Anderson claims the vicar in the drawer symbolizes how the headmaster keeps religion in a drawer to pull out when he needs it.
But I
But what the but the rest of the movie is shot so naturalistically it makes no sense.
said the wicker in the drawer, and also the weapons and the grenades, everything that they find when they're like being punished and they're cleaning up. To me, it was like these kind of institutions, if you dig deep, if you go like
Yes,
one layer
yes,
beneath, you find the corruption, and everything is like hidden
yes.
there and in the drawer.
Okay, but
And
what about the jars with the fetuses in them?
That's all the
yeah,
same.
What the fuck were they doing
No,
there?
no, that's all the same. That's a very good point, Yassi. The way he tells them, you are not being punished. You're given to society by working. Meaning, you're going to clean out all the rubbish that we have gathered for the last hundreds of years, including experiments with fetuses and military equipment. You're going to get rid of that. You take it out. You clean for us. You're not being punished. You are helping us because you show this intelligence. You're going to help us to be clean.
yeah, and if you and when you look deeper, that's what you find. And when you find the reality, you can use this reality as a weapon against the system, the truth, what lies beneath. Yeah. So there was this one thing that I wanted to say.
Well, I just want to interrupt and say you would have made a great free cinema director, Yazzie. I'm just going on record to say that. Okay, go on.
I would go to
Oh,
the screenings of her films.
oh, thank you. I love it. I wish I was living in 60s. That's kind of my dream. Yeah, the grass was
So if
greener.
you live another couple of decades, you'll get to your 60s, then you can work.
Because the 2030s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s.
I wish, but look how my Woodstock looked like. 99 Woodstock was a mess. So I really don't want to be recognized as that
Hey,
generation.
I was
And then, like
lucky. I
flowers
was
in my
in Bosnia.
head, and
I was in
yeah,
Bosnia during the '99
that's
Woodstock, so
nice.
I didn't have to suffer that
Oh,
mess.
lucky you.
I was in Sarajevo while the town was permanently on fire. I was in a much better place.
Yeah, so I wanted to say something. I come across this Jimmy Brasconi. He made a very amazing. I think I found it very fascinating article. It was about he put a few movies and talked about this male victim. He talked about this trope of male victim and put it like across this uh demoiselle in distress trope. It's like okay,
Can I
and the
take a
other,
wild guess as to the movies?
sure, go ahead.
Where they look back in anger, if and I'm gonna go with Saturday night and Sunday morning. Those would be my three picks.
That's it. Exactly.
Do I win
So
a
it's
prize?
kind of, yeah, but there you go. Let's we cheer you. Hold on. We cheer you. Hey. And here's your
reward. Okay, so it talks about like a kind of man that fight like like Gladiator, like Russell Crowe and Gladiator, or we can also say like uh uh man for a season, a figure that stands against the like authoritarian, against like the rebel against the power. So he kind of
James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, or Marlon Brando in The Wild Ones would be the American examples.
yeah, exactly. So then he talks about this, like he says, uh like he said like these like lone wolves, these you know the kind of like victims to the society and what they stand. So he kind of put them in categories. He says like we have one like Joker, the one that like this toxic masculinity, the patriarchy and all that. And then like when he gets to if, he says that in if, what do you see in if? We have like we have that football scene, just like 400 blows. We have this that's what I wanted to like ask this question. Do you see this type of like uh you know male victimization, or like what was bring up here, a man,
Can
what?
I go first? Can I go first?
Yeah, like Ken Loach. He also talks about Ken Loach, Kez. He says like
Oh, Kez is
kind
a
of like
perfect example. Yeah, perfect.
yeah,
Yeah, we
Can
have
I go
to
second?
we
Can I go
have to use
second?
Kez. Hmm.
Go ahead.
yeah. So I think that's a very interesting conversation to like these type of characters in movies, you know, like
Well, and I think
Kez, the
that'll
Kez.
really enrich our conversation later when we get to Kez, when we get to.
Oh, you think that we leave this for when like we watched all these movies, then we talk about
Oh,
them.
no, I
Oh,
have an answer, because I think there's a direct line between Jimmy in Look Back in Anger and Mick in If, and it goes right through Albert Finney's character in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning.
yeah.
And the reason I don't like the film version of Look Back in Anger is in Richard Burton's performance. To me, he comes off as mentally ill as opposed to rebellious, because he gives so much gravitas to the mean things that are coming out of Jimmy's mouth, that you are supposed to be taking him literally, as opposed to so he would be more like a Joker character, the way he's portrayed in that film. Whereas when you get to Albert Finney's performance in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, you can, to some extent, empathize with him and his plight, because he is, stuck in an up north town with a dead end job, and all he's got to look forward to is getting pissed on Saturday night and getting over his hangover on Sunday uh, mornings, and his rebellions make a lot more sense, and because you don't have that gravitas behind it. And that's why I thought that Ken Branagh and especially Malcolm McDowell did a much better version of playing Jimmy in their versions of Look Back in Anger, is because they turn out more like Mick to us, where I don't empathize with Mick at all. I can picture myself at times going through some of these things, and that moment when he's playing that version of Sanctus on the record player, done by the Congolese choir, and he picks up the needle and starts it over again. I was a teenage boy. I totally did that. heard, caught on to something. And when, and this was something that I was trying to start an argument with, oh, um, uh, Vern last, when we did this on Twitter about, but Vern just didn't care enough about the movie to take the bait, unfortunately. But the idea that rebellion is just like chic to these kids. They're not, they're collecting photos of them the way that kids collect pictures of Taylor Swift and put them up on their walls. A poster of Che Guevara means as much, and they speak of revolution in these absurdist, Beckett-esque platitudes all the way through this, and so, without having the gravitas of a Jimmy and a look back in anger, you can actually empathize with these kids. And I didn't think, oh, these kids are just mentally ill. They're, they are kids, and I hate to use the phrase, but it's like they're going through a phase, and and their phase is rebellion. But you notice almost all of their rebellion figures are people of color. Because what's more? Oh, go ahead.
He put them in different categories. He said, we have this guy who goes against the system. We have this type of like preppy private school type of guys, that they've been pushed through the limits by this structure of prefects and whips and headmasters, and he saw it as very allegorical. He says, like, if you like put like these type of people like downward, put them under your thumb and downward pressure, and he saw them as like the neo-Nazis. He says it's 1968, so they're kind of like allegorical to the new Nazi groups that are like coming, like growing out of the ground like zombies. They're coming out, and then that's how he sees them. And then he says they we might see them today as kind of like to them they're kind of like Robin Hoods. That's who they are to themselves. They're noble characters. To us today, when we look at them, we might say like, "Oh, look, they end up like shooters and like the violence, and they become killers. The villains, they turn out well." But to them themselves, they're noble characters, and they're Robin Hoods, and like they're and then he says, to us they look like Lee Henry Oswald, and he's right.
Well, you know what? That's exactly what I was saying with Jimmy and Look Back in Anger. To me, he looked mentally ill, like because of that particular performance by Burton, which changes just everything. How a performance can. He seems like he's just insane, and why that film doesn't resonate with me the way If does, the way The Entertainer does, the way Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, or the film that we're going to be doing next week with Richard Harris's great performance in The Sporting Life, is because you can't empathize with a mentally ill person the way you can with somebody who's experiencing the same thing that you are, except for feeling bad for their mental illness.
That's not the problem. To him, he says that's the life. That's the pressure of existence. That's like he says that, okay, we have like the system, we have the mentally ill, we have the social economical issues that create these type of male victims, and we get to the point that life, existence itself is such a burden that you can't even stand to life itself, did you want to rebel against the life and the existence? That's the point that I wanted to get, and I thought that maybe Sila would like that, and you wanted to
It is.
like.
It's a fascinating point, and I'm glad you brought it up. I'll have to look up that article,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it'll make for an interesting read. I don't know if I agree with him, quite honestly, in terms of the films that I saw, but then I might be an older person than he is, and so I'm seeing it from my generation's point of view. Whereas, of course, if you've grown up in this generation, you may you may latch on to these things. And also, I would say, when you look at this particular free cinema style of film, you're taking out one of the more important contributors, which is Sheila Delaney's, who directed or who wrote, I'm sorry, A Taste of Honey, and Lindsay Anderson directed and co-wrote the screenplay with her for The White Bus, which are female characters going through the exact same thing, because the oppression is the same whether you're male or female. So to call them male victims, I don't know, but their sex may have changed what their solution was. But the last person with agency, the person who shoots the headmaster, is, of course, the unnamed girl.
Oh, that's what Sila said when you were gone. The minute that you were gone, that was the point that Sila made in the room. Yeah, yes, you're right.
Welcome, Math.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, man.
Good. You're not going to try and sell us crypto, are you?
What?
Just a joke I say whenever somebody new comes on stage. You're not here to sell us crypto, are you?
To be honest with you, I can't speak well, I just know a few words, I barely speak. I want to practice.
Well, we'll try and speak more slowly.
What?
That means he's selling crypto.
What?
Well, welcome.
What did you
Hi,
say?
If. Have you seen If?
What?
Hmm?
Do you hear me?
Matt, you can go down to the audience and just listen to the conversation, and if you have something to add, then you can come back up.
No, I want to practice, if you don't mind.
Yeah, but we're talking about a film.
Yeah,
That's the topic of the film.
That's level. I think I can.
Have you seen the film?
Film what?
Yeah, okay, that takes care of that.
Anyway, back to reality. And we will do Taste of Honey. Obviously, it's one of the 10 films. But I am going to space these out. I don't want to do back-to-back depressing up north worker dramas. Which is why we're doing If back to back with This Sporting Life, but I don't really consider If depressing because of all the bits of surrealism and because of the absurdist dialogue and quite frankly because of its ending, which in a sick, twisted way is kind of because especially on the very first viewing, that has a shock factor, kind of uplifting in a way that most of these films aren't out of free cinema. Now, if you think about it, what's actually going to happen? And my question, about what's the end game here? It probably isn't, and that's probably why the Mick Travers character in the two sequels is not the same Mick Travers as this one, because chances are he didn't get out of there alive. But the way that it does end, with the headmaster getting shot in the head and the girl getting the agency and that last shot, it's not depressing by any stretch of the imagination, but let's talk about the ending. First of all, Scylla, this was your first view. Did it surprise you, or was it had it been ruined for you ahead of time?
No, I was not surprised. I was expecting. Actually, I was not expecting anything. But I'm somewhat familiar with Monty Python and the sort, and to me that was just along that line. So I was not surprised at all. It's obviously the one of the key points for anybody who wants to have some type of understanding or teaching about what the art is trying to tell us, or the filmmaker, or it makes sense once you analyze it, once you see it the second, third time. I've seen it, I think, 3 times already, and it makes more and more sense. And I am not the type of person who watches films more than once, but I realize in this very moment that unless you're an absolute weird genius, any film needs to be watched several times. There is no way you can capture what is going on and what is being said to you when you watch the film for the first time, and nothing else.
I got Bisexual She Devils from the Planet Touch Me the very first viewing. I didn't actually have to watch it again, but normally I would say you're correct.
No, but I'm not going to say it makes sense, but it it left me with questions that I would gladly investigate. Where, thinking of the sporting life, it leaves me with questions which I feel compelled to really, really dig deep into why the fuck are we what we are. So it's a very different situation. Um, it's I think it's a good study for people to analyze and to consider, um, because like you mentioned before, it doesn't give you straight answers about anything. And for that reason, if you're somewhat far from stupid, you'll be inspired to just dig deeper and understand why this, why that, what is he, why, just, and I think
Well,
that's one of the best things
and
you can get from
Vern
a
is a
film.
very intelligent viewer of film, and he wasn't looking at this film on a surface level, but I can understand why the film didn't jive for him. What didn't work for him, and there have been viewings of this film for me over the years, and I've had 30 years with this movie, literally 30 years that I've been more than 30 years. I'm sorry. 35 years of watching this film several different times, and there have been viewings where I walked away going, "Why did I think that was so great?" Um, you know, uh, and I unfortunately I come back to it again and again because it is so well made, and because it is so well acted, and because of Anderson's direction. And as a director, he's not in your face. You don't say, "Oh my God, that was a great," it's not a Hitchcock thing, but those high overhead angles with the long shots and the way that they are beautifully edited together, this film it has a rewatchability that some actually better films don't have, because in my opinion, is just so well constructed as a work of art.
That's one one dilemma that I notice, at least in the European context, when I was living there, as well as the American context, living here again. this constant dilemma or necessity of what am I going to do with this as an art piece, and what am I going to do with this as a learn piece? How do I learn from this, and how do I simply appreciate art from the same thing? And I think sometimes, not in this film, but sometimes it seems to me that the art, for the sake of art, there's nothing wrong with it. It might stay a little bit empty, perhaps, but perhaps not. I think as an art piece, it speaks to me, definitely. As a critical piece, it speaks to me, I would say, perhaps even a little bit more. And yeah.
And I don't think that either Sherwin or Anderson are actually saying, we should all raise guns and go out and shoot our headmasters. I don't think that's the point of this film at all. But, and maybe this is why I've seen it so many, many times, I don't know what they're saying, quite honestly. I don't know. I know it's an allegory, and I know it's an allegory for England, but how and why and what parts of England? I mean, but the great thing about it and why it works for me is I can just accept it as a story, of a well-told story about these kids and their experience in this school. And so the different themes to me that they are trying to put across become part of a whole experience as opposed to the be-all end-all. But you have to be a pretty good artist to be able to disguise your themes this well, not telegraph your punches. So that use of the absurdist dialogue. So you do have characters saying things, like, war is the only pure act and things like that. But you're not expected to believe that that's actually what the filmmaker's point of view is. Wouldn't you say, Yassi?
Agreed. Yeah, I always love this type of adding a bit surrealism. What I really like is when you use the technical uh aspect of cinema, like, and very simple ones, not like CGIs, like using the colors and black and white, or like what we've seen in film noirs, like the use of shadows and lights and close-ups and medium shots and pans and use of sound, the techniques of cinema, the techniques of filmmaking, and use it to carry your narrative, to tell your story with them. And what happens here, we talked about it last week, on that, for example, that whacking, that whipping scene, that scene, we said it last week, that that should be taught in, like, every film school, the way that the two
Oh
of
my
the boys.
God, yes. It is. It's a highlight of, and it is a visual masterpiece. Yes,
And we,
absolutely.
that scene and acting of Malcolm McDowell, what happens to his eyes, and the way that movie changes. Before that, as like the card said, t- until that moment, they're just like kids. Everything that happens is like foolish and goofy and everything. And after that, it's like that's their moment of maturity. That's like their moment of change. And the movie grows up with them. The movie rebels with them. The rhythm changes, the every cinematic aspect changes, the colors changes, everything, and the weapons enter the movie. Before that, the posters on the wall are just goofy posters on the wall from the high school kids. After that, they become, the targets. They become something that they start shooting at. We see the anger. We feel the anger through the lens of the camera. And that's what, like, I really, really liked about the film. That how the rhythm changes and it presents the mental state of these young kids. It's a coming of age story, and what a dangerous, like, age, what a dangerous era the 60s was, and how these kids were growing up and maturing up on that strange, bizarre period of time. We feel all that in that 2-hour movie, and through a very aesthetic, beautiful, like, b- some like a gift to the eye kind of thing, not just a movie with a message. No, that wasn't it. That was something beautiful presented to us, well made, well executed. And yeah, and
Well,
so that,
when we look at the last two films we did, Beckett and A Man for All Seasons, you can walk away from those and you know exactly what the theme was. Now there's certain analysis of certain scenes and things like that, but you have no doubt about whose side you're supposed to be on at the end of it. This is a more ambiguous film. This is but it's also a much more ambitious one, I think, because it and I said this about A Man for All Seasons, and it respects the audience's intelligence in a way a film like Beckett, which again is a film I love as a piece of entertainment, and I chose it deliberately because because of my love for it as a piece of entertainment. Doesn't have that respect for the audience's intelligence that this film does. That it doesn't allow you to, as the teacher says, do you have a point of view? And I think when I go through my 15 plus viewings of this film, that's what I come away with. Is Anderson's theme in terms of the direction and Sherwin's theme in terms of the screenplay, is he is asking the audience, do you have a point of view? That it's not about, are you on the right side of this or are you on the wrong side of this? It's, are you on a side? And that's the overwhelming theme that I came away with. But it also, I think the revolutionary part was meant to sell to the late 60s audience. But it is interesting that and we mentioned this before Sila came last week, that this won the Palme d'Or for 1969 at the Cannes Film Festival, because they had to cancel the 1968 film festival because of the student protests that were going on, the ones that exited de Gaulle. And this came out before those protests. So in a way, this kind of was very predictive of that, or in the moment, or in the zeitgeist.
I wanted to add to that
to say
in
about that.
reference.
When the movie came out, of course, go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Yassi.
No, please, go ahead. Mine, it was just...
No, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say, like, when the movie came out, the studios were so against it. They didn't do enough, like, commercials and advertisement about it. And for what movie, Eric? Of course, for which movie they did? Barbarella. They put all their money on Barbarella, and what happened?
Which bombed.
Yeah, Barbarella flopped, and, like, in the box office, and people loved If. So what happened was, I always talk about the movie posters, which I forgot to talk about, like, on Sunday, was that they
the best movie poster ever made. Absolutely. my favorite movie poster ever. I used to have it up on my wall, and the only reason I still don't is because a cat climbed up the wall and scratched it into pieces. I
What happened is that
hope
they
it's dead now.
collect all these negative reviews about the film, and who did all the negative reviews? The people, those that people hate, like I don't know,
The London
the
Times, the Spectator. They
floor.
it was interesting. They even quoted Pauline Kael, and her review was positive, but they quoted the negative part of her review.
And all the musicians and filmmakers and cool people, they said all the positive things about the film, the positive quotes. So they put both on the poster and said, which side are you? Which side do you want to be? Which side do you belong? And that was the advertisement for this film, which I found really smart and like the kind of
Genius.
a genius. And the other thing was that I think you know that the movie was pitched to Nicholas Ray, you know, the rebel without a, and to Seth Holt, the Hammer Seth Holt. And Seth Holt said Lindsay Anderson is the one who's supposed to make this film. And I think that that was a great choice. Everything about the making the production of the film kind of like it was at the right time, the right story for the right time, and people liked it. And I think that's so important to know for a filmmaker to tell what story at what time. So to resonate with people. And it all happened for this film, and that's so good. Because when these are not very lucky filmmakers, these free cinema movements.
Yeah, pretty much this one and Tom Jones and Saturday Night and Sunday Morning are the only ones that made money. Harry Saltzman, who was the very first producer of these films, actually dropped out to make the James Bond films to make the money back that he'd lost on all of them. But he turned out okay. I hear James Bond did pretty well. Which I love it when we get to talk about stuff like this, because that's the history part of the UK cinema history, you know. I mean, and there is a history behind this, you know, and we're going to definitely go into it more when we talk about free cinema next week, because we're talking about a more traditional kitchen sink social reel type of drama next week, but these were daring films made during a time when filmmakers could still dare. Now you can't, because film is maybe second to architecture as the most expensive art form there is in the world. And just as you're not going to take risks building a building anymore, you're not going to take risks making a movie anymore. And so fortunately, what we have now is in the streaming services, those are almost sometimes as good or better than the films that of those days, you know. But you can count on maybe two hands the number of really daring directors out there. You know, I think in the American market, I think of Paul Thomas Anderson, maybe. I think Wes Anderson, you know. In terms of people who are still producing daring content, but normally, yeah, films have to play it pretty safe, you know. And you can definitely see the influence of this film on a Wes Anderson in terms of the camera angles and things that he uses. You know, watch Rushmore sometime, and you can see how and in terms of pacing and things like that, this was a very, very influential film and influenced an entire generation of directors. It's unfortunate that its director Lindsay Anderson only would go on to make 3 more films that were shown in theaters, and had to spend the rest of his time in the theater. Unfortunate for us because we don't have his work for us to see, but obviously fortunate for the London theater because he produced, by all accounts, 3 masterpieces a year there.
Another historical point that you said, the movie was rated X. Got the X rating, and so what happened was that they made a deal with the rating system. I don't know those people. They said, okay, we cut all the penises from the movie, only to
That's
have
an unfortunate phrase. That's an unfortunate way to phrase it.
female full frontal in the film. So they made that exchange and they changed the rating, and yeah, that's what happened.
Well, and
To get
I
that.
hardly find that the middle-aged woman wandering around naked was salacious or erotic in any way, shape, or form. You know.
So,
Be nice now. Be nice.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that it wasn't meant to be. That but she was not meant. That scene was not put in there salaciously or erotically.
So now that we landed
sorry,
with her,
for the feminism, Sila will get and the trophy. The feminism of tonight goes to Sila.
okay, continuing in that lane, what can I, not that I understand the rest of the film, but what can I get from that little walk that she takes in this space, naked? What was that all about?
Well, my take on it is that is showing the repression of the system. She's married to the housemaster, and he is obviously very repressed. And I think the lead into that scene is the scene which also contains some of the better absurdist dialogue, where she's sitting at the table with the boys who,
Yes.
yeah, and
And what's up with that? What are they trying to do to her
she's
in
a
that
female.
moment?
She's the only female that they ever see, right?
That's the
You know,
desperate veto.
and Mick Travers makes a joke out of it. Says leg of a dead man.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you need? And then tries to pass her some HP sauce. But yeah, she is a female, and I think it also goes into the theme of the fagging / what they call scumming of the first year students, and they're treating them and their physical beauty and what have you, and this homosexual flirtatiousness is so adolescent, and that whole entire system, which was that was part of the English school system going all the way back to the 14th century. The better looking, more effeminate first year students were given girls' names, and were when Bobby is in the hallway and says, "Stop tarting," and he just brushes that beautiful lock blonde hair, and all of that, it's repression because they have no access to women. This middle-aged woman is the only woman, and so their urges come out when she is there, just like seeing the beautiful young boys brings it out in them because of suppression. Well, she is suppressed as well in this environment, And in that scene, you're seeing her, the kind of a Lady Godiva type thing, but she's also fondling the boy's things. And Freud would have a field day with that.
Correct. Yeah.
But then
What about the
that's
obsession?
the interpretation that everything that you see in this film is actually happening. In the interpretation that everything that you see in this film is not actually happening, then that is somewhat of that's a fantasy scene, just like the stealing of the motorcycle, and if you take that vantage point, those kind of stories go around private schools all the time about housemasters' wives doing weird shit with the boys in some way, shape, or form, or doing things like that. It's an old saw, and of course they were never or barely ever true, but those are just the kind of thing. And so that interpretation would have it that they never actually stole a motorcycle or met the girl at the coffee house. They just left the school and went out of bounds, because that's the kind of story I would tell if I were a young man, and wanted to big up what I did. Yeah, we stole a motorcycle. We met this great babe. I had sex with her right on the coffee room floor, blah, 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 and that these are just stories being told. So, those are the two interpretations.
Yes, but you mentioned that in the last room where you were comparing the possibilities of it being real when it's black and white or vice versa. And it just goes back and forth with no clarity or no logic whatsoever, because the fencing, for example, is in black and white. So, and part of the situation with the motorcycle is in color, but when they're naked on the floor, it's black and white. So, but they sit at the table and it's still black. It's kind of, I don't know if that's a guidance for what it's real or not. The fact that.
Well, I don't think the black and white or color has anything to do with what's really happening or what's not. I mean, the priest in the drawer is in color, and we know that didn't really happen, right? I'm in the Matrix, aren't I? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. No,
okay.
Yes.
The priest in the drawers, and the color versus black and white thing is, I'm not going to say randomized, but Anderson chose certain scenes to film in black and white because they couldn't film the interiors of the chapel in color and have it turn out right, because
because of the stained glasses.
Because of the stained glass, it dyed everything green and made it look ugly.
But in reference to the black and white, for example, this fencing scene, as soon as they go through the doors, for whichever reason, because they didn't really have to go through the door, and they come to the next room, they continue to fight, but that room turns into color, and that's when Travis goes down.
The music as it turns into color, the music hits a big flourish at that point.
Yes.
And
so
I'm going to go with. Well, I'm going to go with no. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say rule 4 of free cinema, that Lindsay Anderson just did that because it looks really fucking cool,
okay.
And it does.
I'll take it.
With the music strike, the door flies open and the black and white turns into color. Is it's actually one of the visual highlights of the film, quite honestly. Which has many, but that I'm gonna go with he did that because it looked really, really cool. But it's interesting that I say that, because I also think that one of the great things that he does is not impose himself as a director. You don't see a lot of fancy camera movements and things like that. You just see of course, he started out as a documentary director, but a very naturalistic approach to where the camera is, and yet each and every time the composition of the scene is ingenious. But the camera isn't moving around. You don't have, you've got these very long takes, but you've got a still camera, but it's added. I'm going to say odd angle because it's overhead, so that it feels like we're voyeurs or we're peeping in, and it's at that kind of a distance, and yet because of the angle that he chooses, we are also at the people's vantage point in a way, and it's ingenious, but you're not going to look at this film and say, wow, that was a great shot, that was a great, it's not like a Tarantino film where you've got, oh my god, did you see that shot where blah blah blah, because he's not imposing himself as a director on the material. He is just presenting it to us in an excellent, visually beautiful form.
One of the themes that I wanted to talk about was that I really like that uh the fact that these kids at like coming of age again, like it goes parallel to that they're trying to find their identity, and the identity that it's imposed to them through this kind of education is like trying to make soldiers out of them. And when we have this type of, I think the movie is a great criticism and commentary to when you like how like when the soldiers when you have this type of soldiers that are like educated and have like their own thoughts at the time of, again, like I said, that revolution is it was so interesting to me in this film, the way that it looked at the revolution kind of theory. Like these soldiers are those who like turn against the status quo and stand beside the people, and how people switch side. And the parents at the end of the film, like these kids stand up to this like system, and then the parents, the people, they switch side, like to blink of an eye, they go stand to the on the other side, and call these kids, their own kids, bastards, and start shooting at a bunch of kids. That was so fascinating to me.
But well, they're being shot at the time, so there
But
is that.
but
But it's not, you have a, there is a point at which, if someone picks up a gun and starts firing at you and you have access to a gun, you're going to start firing back. I don't care if it's a 9-year-old, you know put the gun down now, put the gun down. Okay, I mean, it might be just self-preservation on their part too. Yes.
bad man with a gun is like can be killed with a good man with a gun. Come on,
Well,
please.
now
Like
we've
that
done
was
a
like
very good job of keeping current school shootings out of this conversation, and I think it's a good idea to keep keeping it out, because that wasn't a thing in 1968. This is actually based more on the history of the student revolts throughout history at the private schools,
but
going all the way back to the 14th century, and if you look at this film in that context of today's school shooting atmosphere in the United States of America, so a different country and a different time, and the past itself is a different country, it would be, to me, like trying to interpret a film from Afghanistan in terms of downtown LA. It just, they're not the same thing.
yeah, but we can, like how we did with the cook the thief. We said like, okay, if that movie was the criticism to Thatcherism, we can like interpret it to bring it to our time. And I think we can do the same thing with this film. I think why do you say, like, I think that's very fascinating, like, to see the, like, how people, like, the mind of the masses, how it changes and how people switch side easily. I think the movie is a criticism to that, that you made these kids these shooters, and now you're blaming them, and you're shooting, and you're like blaming everything on the, like, video games and movies, and no, we are the problem. Like, for once, let's, like, take the responsibility of what we're creating, and, like, look at the education system, and look what we're doing to our young kids, you know to the young generation, and we're forgetting, and we're, like, dismissing their, like, mental health and their actual need, and we're putting them by force through a system that they don't want to be, and they don't belong, and the traditions that they don't understand. And I think that's the thing, that if we want to look at the film today, that's how we can look at it. We can say, like, like, how, like, why now we are trying to, like, find empathy in everything, but let's find, like, empathy aside, find some, like, actual structure. Let's have an, like, structural conversation, and find the real answer, find the, like, an answer that uh actually solve the problem, solve the education problem, instead of blaming the kids, or, like, turning our back at them, or blame them, or, like, find something else to blame. I think that's how we can interpret this film today, and that's why it still speaks to, like, someone like me today.
But to put this in a school shooting, uh, 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 to put this film in a school shooting atmosphere, I think you lose a lot of what makes the film great. Quite honestly, because in terms of something as emotional as and obviously I had two children going through public schools during this time, and I had to fear for them every single day. Well, here's the thing: you have to one day wake up and say, "Gosh, that's a very rare way to die." You know, mass shootings are a very rare way to die. You're not, it is something that we've created as a fear, but I mean, my kids were in far more danger of being hit on their way to the bus to pick them up from school than they ever were of getting shot at school. And yet, of course, that was the fear that was always in the back of my head: school shooting, school shootings, school shootings, because the media kept telling me about them. You know, and life has changed so much in the last 50 years that looking at this film through the vantage point of today, well, then we have to say, is this film siding with the school shooter then? And I don't think it is, but I also don't think that Lindsay Anderson or Sherwin or anyone involved in this film had any idea that school shooting was even going to be considered a phrase or a term come 2023.
Yeah, of course. I'm not saying that. No, no, no. Look, of course, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, the movie, like, if we want, even if we want to look at it from that point of view, we can see that the movie build up on how these kids become violent, how these kids become these people, who are to blame, the system, the education system. Let's find the problem. Where is the problem? And I think that's, even if from that point of view, the movie still resonates today, and still has something to say, which is, like, look at this institutional problem, like the roots of the problem.
And my point, I think, would be that it has more to say, the same way Waiting for Godot still has things to say today. Um, uh, I think it has more to say about our current society as an allegory for England at that time in 1968 than it does for an allegory for the American school system in 2023. But that doesn't make your point less valid. Also, I get very defensive about this film because it doesn't get talked about a lot anymore, and you're not going to see it on Turner Classic Movies, and that wasn't the case pre-Columbine. That's a post-Columbine thing, and it's obviously, if you can't tell from my having talked about it for now 5 hours, it's one of my favorite films of all time, and I get very defensive about people who kind of pigeonhole it into the school shooting movie, and bring it up on lists with things like Elephant, or Bowling for Columbine, the Michael Moore documentary, or things like that. Because to me, I don't know how to put this, but to me, it there's something deeper than that in this film that I think, by putting it in that category, cheapens my experience. And if you go into the film using that as what you're going to get out of the film, I think cheapens the experience for people watching it.
No, I understand what you're saying. You don't want to, like, just because the movie is not been talked about right now because of this point, you don't want the, like, that will be the talk about this film. Yeah, I totally understand. No, I'm just
Because
saying.
that's it's 5 minutes of a 117-minute film. So and when we've talked about this over the 5 hours, we've been talking about the other 112 minutes far more than we talked about that last 5 minutes. We haven't really talked about the ending that much, or when it does come up, it's to highlight a point from earlier in the film, if that makes sense. And Sila, this was your first time viewing it, wasn't it?
I saw it yesterday for the second time, I believe. So yes, I've seen it only twice.
Okay.
I saw it last
Okay.
week
So
and
when the
yesterday.
when the ending happens, you've seen a film, wouldn't you say, that was rich enough on its own that if it had a different ending, it would still be a great experience, wouldn't you say?
I I watched a series called what's the name of it? Yeah. It's kind of silly, a little bit silly. Um, it's about an airplane that lands. It goes through some turbulence, and when it lands, the people receive the airplane wondering why that airplane landed because they lost it 5 years ago. For them in the plane, it was just a matter of seconds.
Lost.
Manifest.
Manifest, correct, manifest. And the reason I mention that is because the conclusion of the series, as far as I've seen it, I think I've seen the whole thing, explain, gives some sense to the whole, puts it on a different level of understanding or acceptance of what I'm going through for 5 or 6 seasons. And for me, this is one of those films where the conclusion does not round up what happened during the film, but it puts it gives some context to what the statement is and to what happened before. So I think it's a one good, I wouldn't say perfect, but a very good way to conclude that film, if that answers your question.
It does very well. We're going to have to wrap up because I have, unfortunately, other things to do. I wasn't expecting us to go a full 2 hours. But last thoughts, and then hopefully we'll see you all Sunday for The Sporting Life.
I saw The Sporting Life yesterday. I like it.
Oh, good. Wonderful. My last thought is about Joyce, that character that we like, that we see, the scum, that he has the. I think he carries the whole message of the film. We talked about it on Sunday. I said, like, when the part of the film when they're trying to teach him that how to say that sentence to the, they don't want him to learn. He wants, but the the others, they tell him, you don't need to, you just need to pronounce it correctly and say it in this way, just like a parrot, repeat it without understanding. And I think that's the commentary to the system, to the education system, that what we're doing to our kids, we forget, like, they just go to school to get a good grade and just get graduated without actually learning something. Even if the kid wants to learn, the system dictates, the system says, no, do it this way, otherwise we all get
Yeah,
punished.
yeah, yeah.
From the fear, we learn out of fear. We learn, we don't actually learn, we just repeat, and it's empty inside. And that's the fear in this film, and it's very, very well depicted, and how you can change a, like, lively, beautiful kid like Malcolm McDowell, that enters the school wearing his mustache, trying to hide his sin under his mustache, and then we strip him from what he likes to be, his masculinity, his beliefs, his, like, craziness, his, like, vivant, like whatever he is, like this young man, and turn him into what happened to him at the end of the film. Like, we strip people out of their soul, just like that nurse, like, strip them, like, from whatever they got, and, like, inspect their private parts, and we strip people out of their privacy and then expect them to respect our privacy, and that's not going to happen. And as long as the education system is like this, nothing's going to change.
Sila, final thoughts.
On a sadder note, it has not changed, and that was 60 years ago. So I just thank you for forcing me to watch this film, because I would have
You're
never
always
picked it up.
welcome.
Thank you.
I'm just going to end with the last lines from Rudyard Kipling. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and what's more, you'll be a man, my son. And on that,
If.
if. And on that note, we're going to call it a day, and we'll see you Sunday for This Sporting Life. Director Lindsay Anderson, 1963, starring Dumbledore himself, the one and only Richard Harris. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.